So I'm taking a spin up the new cycleway up the Royal Canal. I'm going to see how far up we can get. The section from here down past Croke Park is still under work, so can't go through that at the moment, but I'll do this on time lapse so it doesn't take too long. This initial section will be pedestrian only. There's a bicycle diversion there on the left, which will open later on. But this section here, as you can see, is mixed. So the wait at these traffic lights can be quite long. It was pretty quick today. And once you're through this section, you're on to the older track. This is narrower. It's also rough in parts. It's not terrible, and it's quite easy to cycle. There are speed bumps at intervals as well. And it's already a fairly popular walking route to get along the canal between Phibsboro, Cabra and the turn off to Finglas, as well as further out to Ashtown. At the moment, you can actually navigate for 8 kilometres up the canal bank from where we started in Fairview, and that will extend back towards the Liffey once the section below is completed. However, sadly, it will take quite a long time before it will extend far in the other direction, and we'll see why that is in the moment. You switch sides of the canal here at Ashtown, and then there's a relatively long stretch before the next bridge. The next thing, in fact, that's going to be happening is we're going to be going through the very complex interchanges that are the M50. The Royal Canal is actually pretty old. It was developed from about the 1780s into the 1830s or 40s, and was a main archery for freight for quite a while, coming into Dublin from the west, particularly turf and agricultural products, but also the route by which a lot of people from the west would reach Dublin. You'd basically just find the canal, walk along it, and then you'd end up in Dublin after you'd been walking for a number of days to a week. Of course, by the mid-1800s, it was being replaced by the railways, and it fell increasingly into disuse. So really by the 1980s, it had been all but abandoned, and was revived basically as part of a side product of the peace process, essentially, when Waterways Ireland was set up to look after all the canals and navigations in Ireland. They've got quite a good podcast that's worth listening to. So when you got to this bit, you might want to switch sides and go over to the other side for the very last bit that's currently navigable, because this section of it will end in a set of steps or 2 chicane barriers that go onto the bridge and have no bicycle signs on them. Now, you can fit your bike through the chicane barriers. I've done it. I presume that's just a health and safety thing. But in any case, your journey will probably come to a sensible end at Castleknock station, and I'll explain why that is in a minute. That other side is easier. That'll bring you up to the road at Castleknock station, and you'll be able to divert around what's called the deep cutting, and you're about to find out what that is too. The canal was quite an engineering feat, and the section we're now approaching, the deep sinking, was one of the most technically difficult because they had to get through rock, and that rock was at a higher level than the rest of the canal, so they basically had to pickaxe, essentially, a trench through the rock over about 3 kilometres, and that has also created a problem for us today. Alright, so we've now got to Castleknock train station and the bit that's called the deep cutting. You may not be able to see it, but just in the hedgerow here there's a no bicycle sign, and there's a good reason for that, which is that the deep cutting turns into a very, very narrow path with about a 4-metre drop into the canal. In the interest of science, I cycled it yesterday. It's not completely impossible. However, there are roots, there are rocks, and there were patches of mud. It had been raining quite recently, and I would say it's actually quite dangerous. And I wasn't on a loaded touring bike, I just had my bike stripped down, and there was moments I was nervous about. So don't do this. Don't go that way. What you can do instead is you can take a detour and go around about 3 kilometres and come back onto the route about 3 kilometres down along there. So if you're intrigued by the rest of the route, I have actually cycled the entire thing to the Shannon at Cloney Harbour. I've also taken the branch that goes down to Athlone and reaches the Shannon there along the old green rail line, and you'll find videos of all that on my YouTube channel, E-Bike Touring Life. So give the channel a follow. If you like this video, maybe give it a thumbs up, and maybe if it takes off, I'll see you on the road.